Hello everyone, this is Ramirez with Tidewater Renaissance Fighting Arts, and today we're going to talk a little bit about something you may need if you do blast fectin, if you do harness fectin, if you do Buhurt, if you do SCA, heavy combat, and that is arming points. um, let's say you do blast fectin, and now, especially with Max CZ doing some of their plastic armor or even pro plates, if you have a jacket that doesn't have a space for them, you need to find a way to attach them. So you might be attaching something like this for your elbow, and you'll notice that it has these two holes in the top of there, and that's meant to obviously attach it to the elbow point in your um, on your jacket. Now, if you're doing armored combat, you might have the same idea, but you have steel. So this is a steel elbow. This is one of my old steel elbows, and you'd have, once again, those two holes to sew it or to attach it to your gambeson. Or if you were doing armored combat, bowherd, etc., you might have a set of pauldrons. And the reason I bring this up is even in blast fectin, now, as I said, Max EZ makes plastic pauldrons. They also make what's basically a shoulder plate. Just like you'll see this part as the shoulder for some pro plates. But once again, you'll see those two holes for tying things off. And if you don't have a jacket that already comes with those things, and if you're doing armored combat, some companies will sell the gambesons that already have the points. If you're doing blast fectin, some jackets come with sewed points for you to attach those plates to. But sometimes you may not have ordered one, and you may need to do that. You may need to find a way to attach those plates. Let's say you buy a jacket that doesn't have those, but you buy the plates later on because you want to attach them. Well, what you're going to need is one of these. These are meant to be sewn onto your gambeson or onto your jacket, and they have the attachment points, so you can then have it sewn on and you just attach the plates to those. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to make them. I mean, it's not even worth buying, and there aren't a lot of places that you can buy the points themselves to sew yourself. But it's such an easy thing to do that I wanted to take a little time and talk about how we do it. So you start out, you're going to need some leather. And you're probably going to need some type of shear to cut through leather. These are specifically for leather. They're heavy cutting shears. And you're going to need a hole punch, a leather hole punch. Now I want to say one word about hole punches. You can get them very easily on Amazon. You can get them pretty much, you get them at Tandy or whatever, but it's going to cost you more. Get a nice pair. There are some really cheap pairs for $8 or $9, and that's like really going cheap. Pay the extra $5. Get something that has an assisted, and has nice handles, because, you know, just like wearing good gloves for HEMA and having good protective gloves, this will save your hands. If it's just metal with some tool dip on it, it's going to be rougher, and you're for the $2 or $3 more to get something like this, I strongly recommend it because it will make it easier for you to do hole punches, and you'll save your hands trying to squeeze on some of the cheaper leather hole punches that are out there. So, with that leather that we talked about, cut yourself a square. Roughly like what, 2-3 inches by 1.5-2 inches, but you just want a little rectangle. And what you're going to do next is just punch. So I have it on the largest punch setting. Find the middle and poke 2 holes, or make 2 holes side by side. If the holes aren't big enough, all you're going to do is you're going to punch kind of around them to make them a little bigger. But this will be fine for the purposes of today. This could be a mask because of the camera. I can put that there. But no, we're going to just make those 2 little holes in the center. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your hole punch, move it to the smallest setting possible. So in my case, I went from the biggest straight to the smallest. And all you're going to do is punch a series of holes around the edge of the point. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I am going to give you an idea of what I'm doing so that you kind of see that this isn't complicated, and that's why I said there's no point in going out, and no point, pun intended, of going and having these made. But basically, you see how I've made those several holes through there? You're going to basically do that around the whole thing. And if I show you a finished one, take the thong out of it, you can see that I have made holes around there. Now in this case, I wanted to make the holes a little bigger, so I just kind of punched a couple of times around here to make these holes a little bit bigger. You'll notice on this it's fairly narrow, which is fine. We could work with that. If I had different types of pointing materials, which I'll talk about in a minute, I may want these holes a little bit bigger. And really all you're going to do is, that's it, you're done. You would sew that on the garment. Sometimes you would add the thong ahead of time. And it could be that you use, if you're doing Blossfectin and HEMA, I know that Purple Heart and a couple other places make that springy string material, and it should come with most of your plates anyway. So you could use that as the thong of the point. If you're doing something heavier, you may want, there are places like I think Historic Enterprises, a couple of other living history websites that sell you the actual aglet laces. I think you can even get them on Cult of Athena, but they'll have little brass aglets at the end, and it'll be a linen cloth material. And if you're doing it, you want it to be really historical, that's what you should be using. If you want to be simple, a simple leather strap, you can get these leather laces at shoe stores and stuff like that. It's fairly easy to get. And all you're going to do is take the ends, and this is why I probably made the other one, this is a little tighter fit to get these through this hole, but I can do it. And there you are. You would have a point, and you would have the thong to tie the plates in place. One thing I would tell you is, if you're doing this for chainmail or some other heavy things, one of the little tricks I will do is I'll take the center of it, and I'll just put a simple overhand knot there. And the reason for that knot, and as I said, not so much for HEMA, but probably for, or Blossfectin, but for Harnessfectin, that knot won't pass through this hole, and it won't pass through that hole. And why is that important? Let's say this is tied off to something, and for some reason one of these breaks, you'll have the knot where it's tied in, and so the one will hold while the other one is broken off, and then you can kind of fix it later. The downside is you'll have to find a way to cut this knot. I use this particularly when I do pointing through chainmail, because I know with chainmail I don't sew it, I just kind of put it through the holes in the chainmail, and that way if it breaks, which it invariably will because of the nature of chainmail, I can easily just pull this out, replace the thong, and I'm done. But for other situations, leave that knot out, because eventually you're going to sew this to your garment. And you need a way to kind of feed this through. So you can take a set of tweezers, or if you have like I forget the term, but it's a medical equipment, like the tweezers for that. And then you can just feed it through and pull the thong through there, so you'll have it. But you won't be unstitching this every time to replace it. But that's what you would do. You'd sew this onto your jacket, or if you're doing armored combat, you'd sew this to your gambeson. When you sew that onto your gambeson or your jacket, what you use will be important. I have a member of my club who tried to make their own armor and jacket, and it did not go well, because he was like, I'm going to just sew some foam padding here, there, and he just kind of sewed it with regular thread, and I was like, this is not going to bode well for you. Thankfully, at some point later, he realized that and bought himself a jacket, so good on them. But in sewing points, normally if you want an elbow, you'd want to sew it at a high point in the shoulder, usually pretty close to where the seam is, or you can do it up here if it's a pauldron actually on the top of the shoulder. For the elbows, you'd want it slightly above. So if you're doing something with an elbow cop, you want it to be slightly higher. You don't want it on the elbow because that's going to leave the plate a lot lower. So make sure to do it a little higher. And when you're sewing these onto a jacket or a gambeson or leather, depending on what material you have, try not to use regular thread. I'm going to make 2 recommendations to you. The first, especially if you're doing HEMA jackets, is this is linen thread. It's much stronger than regular, go to the craft store, pick up thread. I get this from Miriam's Yarn and Fibers. I'll try to leave a link. I don't know if she has a website. She's local to me, and I happen to be the best man at her wedding. So, I have a source. But linen thread is actually really, really useful for sewing for HEMA jackets, etc. It's not as thick as the other alternative I'm going to suggest, but it's historically accurate if you're doing period garments, and it's significantly thicker than regular thread, but it's not so thick that it can't get through the jacket. So this is what I use a lot of times when I'm sewing. Another alternative, if you're doing harness fectin, you're doing booher, you're wanting something a little more hardcore, would be this. This is waxed nylon. It's commonly known as artificial sinew. It's very strong. The downside to it is it's also really, really thick. So it is difficult to get through really, really fine materials. Usually HEMA jackets that are rated for, 350 or certainly 800 Newton, you're going to have a hard time passing this through the garment. So you want to try to use this on something that, let's say for the padded gambesons, a lot of times don't have the same Newton rating, so the cloth is not as tightly woven. So it probably would work there, and it's going to be a lot stronger and hold up some of the abuse if you're doing harness fectin, or you're doing something where you're going to heavy impact. This is less likely to break. This is less likely to break than regular thread, but still there are limits. So I would say either use linen thread or artificial sinew. And all you're really going to do is when you find that point, you're going to sew through these holes and then just tie off your thread. Try to do it from the inside of the garment going out. So when you tie it off at the end, that ties on the inside, not on the outside where it can be struck. And that's pretty much it. Then you would just take whatever bit of armor you have, and I'm going to use the elbow, the steel elbow, just because it doesn't have anything on it right now. And what you do is, when this is on the garment, you would just take your thong ends, and you can do it inside, you can do it outside. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the outside. Or maybe I'm not. So tight fit here. Yep, this one's just a little bit, this thong is just a little bit too tight. So I am going to swap out for a thinner piece. Once again, I'm just going to put that through the thong there. And what will happen is you'll just take your 2 ends, you'll pop it through one, you'll pop it through the other, and you'll see normally this would be sewn to your garment, and then you can just tie it off. So, try to be quick about that. And there you go. So this would be attached to your garment, and then you would just buckle in this case. But if you have a regular HEMA stuff, it probably has Velcro, but you'd Velcro it to your arm. And the nice thing is it's not going to go anywhere. So let's say if I don't have something pointed, that elbow could theoretically slide. By having it pointed, I know it's going to stay in the exact same place the whole time. And that's the point of pointing your armor or your HEMA jacket, so that you can have those plates be on there and stay on there reliably. If for whatever reason, I don't know too much about pro plates, they may have like holes at the top and the bottom, so you'd need a point at the top or at the bottom. If you're using the Max CZ armor, the plastic armor with the pauldrons and the elbow coiter, you can once again point it by sewing these onto your jacket, and then you'll have a place to tie those different armor parts to. So that's my video, just a quick guide to making points, how to do it, what to use. So as I said, standard bit of leather. These are the things you'll need. Leather, some sort of tie material. It could be a leather lace. It could be an aglet, the points that you can get from historical sites. It could be, if you're doing booherd, it could be even paracord. I don't like that from a historical standpoint, but it's going to be a lot stronger. And the tools you'll need, so you'll need some leather, you'll need a hole punch, you'll need a set of scissors that can go through leather, and then to sew it in place, you'll need either sinew, or you'll have some linen thread. Another word about the sinew is it's very slick. So instead of just tying it off, one more thing about sinew is you're going to want to melt it. And the easiest way is just to grab a lighter and then just ever so lightly melt the ends, and just kind of take a piece of metal or plastic. Don't do it with your finger, but press against it, and it'll basically fuse the nylon together into one piece. Otherwise, you run the risk of, because it's a very slick material, knots don't hold very well to it. So I just want to kind of give you that heads up if you choose that route. Once again, if you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And I hope that you enjoyed this. I know it was a little bit longer of a video, so I do appreciate your attention. And if you enjoyed this and you want more kind of armoring tips and tips on equipment maintenance, then please, once again, leave your comments down below, and I will see you in the next video.